Hi! New World is on a Steam sale for around $16 right now, 60% off, and with that a lot of people seem to be wondering if it's worth playing. I've logged nearly 3,000 hours in the game at this point, and I've both been highly critical and very supportive of some of the things they've done, so I'd like to address this question as best as I can. You'll find a lot of conflicting information online from people who haven't played since shortly after the release, and other people that have just recently started playing, as well as those who have been grinding the whole time, but most of these perspectives separately can't really tell you the full picture. A joke that my friends and I used to make was that the game released in a beta test state and that for the first year we were just beta testers of an early version of the game, an early access so to speak, and that is a perspective that many people share. At this point I can confidently say that New World is no longer in that state and feels more like a fully fleshed out title. It's obviously not without issues, but it's much more of a complete game. We also have a major content patch with the various new improvements coming this week and the expansion coming 3 months after that, so there is a lot to look forward to at the moment. But let's begin where you start, and that's of course the leveling experience. Now questing used to be fairly dull in New World, which is why they reworked the entire early quest line. It is finished up to level 45-ish right now, but you can kinda pace questing however you want, you are not bound to the levels of the zones. After that it's not fully reworked, but some of the later zones are a little bit better anyways and didn't need a full rework. But now the early questing is definitely good, it has good storytelling and good pacing with not too much running around aimlessly. The leveling speed has also been increased massively, and the XP rewards especially for questing have been improved, so you are mainly leveling through questing. Trade skills and professions are also more efficient and fun to level than they used to be. You used to have to just craft the same thing over and over, now you're getting rewarded for crafting a mix of different things and getting different resources. One of the absolute standout things of the games that you will experience while leveling is the world exploration itself. The world is absolutely beautifully designed, it has some of the best visual and sound design in the entire genre, and that is something that even people that don't like the game will point out about it. Especially the audio team just completely blows it out of the park every time they do anything really. And this is important because it makes gathering so much more satisfying. It makes it feel like everything has an impact. And speaking of impact, what you may be wondering is, what impact will progressing in the game have on my wallet? Do I need to spend money anywhere to progress? The answer here is fortunately no. There is no monthly subscription, there are no added extra fees that you have to pay for anything, there are a few select features that you can pay for. The first ones are skins that you can buy in the shop and use instead of your normal armor, but you don't have to. Every normal armor is still unique in its design, and you also get some free skins occasionally, for example from Twitch drops. By extension, this will likely apply in some form to transmog skins in the near future as well. They're not out yet, but they're coming in the middle of the next season. Speaking of seasons, another thing you can buy is the premium version of the season pass. There's always a free version of the season pass, which gives you a bunch of rewards, and then there's a premium version. The premium version doesn't increase your progression or anything unless you buy some skip progression, but mainly it gives you some extra rewards. Most of these rewards are not very important or impactful for players that have been playing for a while. They're very minor bonus gimmicks here and there, but for a fresh starting player, they can be helpful. They can be nice tools that help you a little bit along the way. For example, the Season 2 Season Pass will also contain some extra transmog tokens, so you can get some extra skins converted. So that's nice, that's a nice little bonus, but nothing that would give you a massive inherent advantage in the game, and nothing that would give you any advantage in PvP or late game progression. The loot from the Season Pass is actually usually quite bad, sadly. And then the last thing you can spend money on, and arguably the only one that can give you some form of advantage in the game, are gear sets, which allow you to swap between different gear loadouts very quickly compared to normally swapping out pieces individually. You unlock 2 free slots early in the game, and you can get a third one from the current season pass, but that's gonna expire soon. But after that you'd have to buy additional ones if you want more. That will matter a lot less soon though, because they are changing the way that gear works in general, removing ward from the game, which means you don't really need many gear sets at the same time. It seems likely that at that point you'll probably use one gear set slot for a PvP set and one for a PvE set, and everything else beyond that is just convenience for quicker crafting or something. So overall, New World is definitely not a heavily monetized game, though I personally didn't like the monetization of the gear sets. If you value the information I've given you so far, I'd love it if you could shift these bars just a tiny bit, that would help me out a ton. Let's talk a bit about good and bad aspects of the game. When it comes to things that are overall good in New World, I would say that the PvP and combat system are fantastic and one of the main draws of this game and why so many people love it so much. Keep in mind that I'm specifically saying system here and not the modes, because we get to that on the not so great side. What also is absolutely fantastic are the trade skills, especially the gathering. This is something I can't point out often enough. I think New World has kind of set a new standard for how satisfying gathering in an MMO can be. As I also said, the world design is absolutely great. And what is also very nice is the frequent updates that we have to the game now via the season system. This was an issue before, but now we're getting a major update every 3 months and then at least 2 balance passes. In other words, you'll see at least minor changes every month. The dev team is also incredibly transparent, very frequently discussing the decisions that they're making in videos, answering community questions. Whatever you can imagine in terms of communication, they're doing it across multiple channels, so that is great. Something that I would place in a more average category, that's not good or bad, is the PvE. There are some aspects of it that make it feel less rewarding than it could be when it comes to loot pools, for example, and the combat in PvE also doesn't feel quite as good as the PvP. It's still not bad, and improvements are on the way both in Season 2 as well as in the expansion, so it's something where I'm kind of in the middle ground. And then there are the things that just straight up need improvements. When it comes to the variety of PvP modes, once you hit level 60, you'll notice fairly quickly that they can get somewhat repetitive. Sure, some people still love grinding them, but I feel like there is more room for at least one additional mode that would make it a bit more fun. And some modes are also somewhat gated, like wars require you to be in a company, so that makes things a little bit more complicated. Game performance, especially in PvP scenarios, can also be somewhat lackluster, especially if you don't have the best CPU, because it seems to be very heavily CPU bound in that regard. Some parts of the content very noticeably haven't been overhauled yet compared to others. What for example comes to mind are invasions and corruption portals. If you do a few of those, you'll know what I mean. You'll see, okay, well, this is kind of a bit rough around the edges. This doesn't really feel that engaging because it hasn't really been changed since launch. The aspects of the game that have been overhauled feel much better in comparison, and I'm hoping that those things will be overhauled sooner rather than later. The housing system is there and you can decorate your house, but it still feels like somewhat of an afterthought compared to many other features of the game. There are various issues with access to high-level gear and best-in-slot gear that both concern PvE and PvP, but we know that improvements to that are coming very soon, and especially in the expansion I expect very major steps in that regard. So I'm not too concerned with this, and as a new player this shouldn't really be a worry to you, because by the time it becomes relevant for you, it's probably already very different. I also think that the progression past level 60 is a bit clunky to actually reach the proper late game. And this is something I want to talk about specifically if you're a new player and you want to know what you should do in the next 3 months up until the expansion. I think the best call is to get the game now while it's on sale, get a taste of the game, find out what it's like, see if it's for you, and then decide how you want to progress until the expansion. Because with the expansion we will have some form of gear reset where our current gear won't be very useful anymore, meaning it isn't really worth it for you to grind heavily for best in slot gear. So if you're a very casual player that doesn't have much time to play the game, then I would recommend just very casually leveling to level 60 in those 3 months, unless obviously you're more casual than that. In this case, you'll get to the expansion whenever you get to it. But that way you don't have to rush anything, you can just kinda make your way up to 60, maybe level some trade skills along the way. You can kinda just pace yourself in that way and however you like. But that's something that will give you enough to do, it's not difficult to do at the same time, and you'll have plenty of fun doing so. At level 60 you are at 500 gear score, and there are 2 steps to first get to 600 gear score and then to 625. But since there is some form of reset, I'm assuming that this whole progression will be overhauled in the expansion and will likely be significantly quicker. So if you invest too much time into that as a casual player, you may feel like you've just wasted your time. But that's not a problem. You can experience a decent amount of the level 60 late game content while being at 500 gear score. For example, if you want to PvP, that is absolutely possible because your gear score will be normalized to 600 in PvP modes. This doesn't mean that you're as strong as the perfectly geared player in that mode, but you will definitely be able to hold your own. I would recommend buying gear with Resilient and Elemental Aversion to start out with. That is something that will allow you to survive a lot more and have a good baseline, probably better than some of the players you will be playing against, to be honest. You can also do the Brimstone Sands questline, which is meant for high level and is just very fun in general. And that questline will get a new branch, so to speak, in Season 2, which is coming, again, this week. So by the time you reach 60, it will be available, which is also very, very fun to play, in my opinion, the best questline in the game so far. You can also start running normal expeditions and familiarize yourself with the basics of that. Last but not least, another thing you can do that doesn't depend on gear score is leveling your trade skills. This may come in very, very handy in the expansion in various ways. If you're on the other end of the player base and you're a hardcore player and you just want to grind all the way up and be as prepared as possible for the expansion, then you'll have a little bit more work, but that's what you want as well at that point, right? So, what you want to do is still grind to level 60 first, but then you need to get from 500 expertise to 600 expertise. This is a ton easier than it used to be, but it still takes a little bit of time at least. What you want to do is chest runs as often as possible. Those are often announced in recruitment, often as ECR, Elite Chest Run, because those will increase your expertise very quickly. Likewise, you want to do the Genesis expedition as much as possible. Some people even just do the first boss and then leave and go back in for a quicker expertise increase. And you want to use all kinds of gypsum and infused casts wherever you can. There are plenty more detailed guides out there if you want to know the specifics, but this should cover the basics at least. Once you've reached 600 expertise on your armor, jewelry and the weapons that you're using, you can start running mutations. These are a more difficult form of expeditions that require some more preparation, and there are 10 levels of them. By the time you reach the 10th level, you'll also reach 625 gear score, which is the highest you can go right now. If you have that, you are as prepared for the expansion as you possibly can be. If you're grinding the game, this is something that is absolutely feasible within 3 months. For any tips and news on the content after that and what weapons to use and whatnot, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. That's the kind of stuff I talk about on my channel. All in all, is New World worth its current sale price? Yes, absolutely, 100%. This game costs about as much as a movie ticket, or probably less these days to be honest, or maybe an Uber Eats meal or whatever, and you get tons of hours of fun out of it. And even if at some point you feel like the game is not for you, you will absolutely have gotten your money's worth at that point. While the game is absolutely not without shortcomings, the devs openly acknowledge most of them and actively work to improve them, something that can't be said for every game nowadays anymore. Oh, and did I mention we're getting our first raid this week? Thanks to my patrons for supporting this video, and thank you for watching. SLOTH out.